Garland Tyree, a 38-year-old resident of New York, was a man whose life was deeply enmeshed with the city's gang culture. Known by the moniker SI, Tyree was not merely a peripheral figure. He identified himself as a member of a blood subset and was considered by law enforcement to be a significant personality within these circles. Some reports even described him as the East Coast leader of the Bloods gang, while others referred to him as the godfather of the 9 Trey gangsters, a specific blood set. This paints a picture of an individual who held a position of influence and authority within a notorious criminal organization, a status that would inevitably draw considerable attention from the authorities who worked diligently to maintain public safety on our streets. His involvement in the criminal underworld was not a recent development, but rather a long and troubled history. Official records indicate that Garland Tyree had accumulated a staggering 18 prior arrests. These were not minor infractions. His convictions included serious offenses such as weapons possession, illicit drug charges, and assault. Even more troubling, Tyree had been arrested in connection with a murder in the early 1990s. While he was ultimately convicted on a lesser charge related to that incident, it marked an early and grave entry into the criminal justice system, leading to a significant period of incarceration. He reportedly served 6 years in prison, which included time for a homicide committed when he was just 16 years old, a stark indicator of a youth spent amidst violence. Despite this extensive criminal record, Tyree had been released from prison and was on probation since July of 2014. This release, however, came with stringent conditions as he was also under federal parole. These parole terms were designed to monitor his activities closely and prevent a return to criminal behavior. One crucial stipulation was that he was prohibited from traveling without explicit permission from his parole officers, and was certainly not allowed to leave the country. At the time of the events that would lead to his final confrontation, Tyree was also reportedly under active investigation for several unsolved homicides in New York City, suggesting that law enforcement believed his criminal activities had not ceased upon his release, and that he remained a person of serious concern. Interestingly, Tyree did not shy away from his past or his gang affiliations. In some ways he embraced and even chronicled them. He utilized social media platforms to share his experiences and perspectives on gang life. Furthermore, he had authored a novel that presumably delved into these same themes, offering his narrative to the public. About a year prior to the fateful standoff, he had even posted a video to YouTube where he discussed gang life in the book he had written. This public persona, documenting a life steeped in gang culture, provided a complex and often contradictory image of a man who was both a product and a proponent of a dangerous lifestyle, a lifestyle that was rapidly heading towards a tragic collision with the law. The chain of events leading to the tragic climax began in the early hours of Friday, August 14, 2015. At approximately 5:45 in the morning, as dawn was just beginning to break over New York City, a specialized team from the United States Marshals Regional Task Force converged on a residence in the Mariners Harbor section of Staten Island. They were not alone. Officers from the New York City Police Department accompanied them, providing local support for the federal operation. The target address was identified as the home of Tyree's girlfriend, a multi-family housing complex where Tyree was believed to be staying. The early hour was likely chosen to ensure the element of surprise, a common tactic in such operations. The primary reason for this law enforcement presence was not a new crime, but rather an alleged breach of his existing legal constraints. The officers were there to execute an arrest warrant for Garland Tyree based on a federal parole violation. The specific infraction, as later detailed by authorities, was an unauthorized trip he had taken to the Bahamas. Under the strict terms of his federal parole, Tyree was explicitly forbidden from traveling without obtaining prior permission, and leaving the country was completely out of the question. This illicit journey, therefore, constituted a serious violation, compelling the United States Marshals to take action and bring him back into custody to answer for this breach of his supervised release conditions. As the combined team of United States Marshals and NYPD officers approached the residence, they could not have anticipated the immediate and dangerous turn events would take. Instead of a straightforward arrest, they were met with a volatile situation emanating from within the basement apartment where Tyree was located. It quickly became apparent that Tyree was aware of their presence and was not planning to surrender peacefully. He chose to respond by deploying a commercial-grade smoke bomb, or what some reports described as a smoke grenade, inside his dwelling. This deliberate act instantly filled the apartment with thick, acrid smoke, creating a chaotic and hazardous environment for everyone involved, and signaling a clear intent to resist arrest. The dense smoke billowing from the apartment was not just an obscurant, it soon led to a more significant danger. The ignition of the smoke device caused a fire to break out within the residence, escalating the situation from a parole violation arrest to a potential inferno. With flames now involved and the interior conditions rapidly deteriorating, the fire department of New York was immediately dispatched to the scene. Firefighters trained to save lives and combat blazes arrived prepared to enter the smoky structure, unaware that they were stepping into an armed confrontation. This development tragically set the stage for an injury to one of New York's bravest, and the beginning of a long and perilous standoff. When the fire department of New York arrived to battle the spreading fire, firefighters were placed directly in harm's way. Among them was Lieutenant James Hayes, a respected veteran with 30 years of service. Hayes, also a 9/11 responder, entered the smoke-filled basement apartment to search for anyone trapped inside. This raises a critical question. Why was an unarmed firefighter sent into an active, dangerous standoff? Standard safety protocols are meant to protect first responders from such threats. Sending Hayes in without tactical support exposed him to unnecessary risk and put lives in jeopardy. As Hayes focused on his rescue mission, reports allege that Garland SI Tyree, barricaded inside, opened fire with an assault rifle. The alleged gunfire had devastating consequences for Hayes. He was struck by bullets reportedly fired by Tyree. Tyree allegedly fired 4 shots, 2 of which hit Hayes in the leg and buttocks. The priority immediately shifted to rescuing the wounded firefighter. This attack escalated the situation, turning it from a fire response into an active shooter and barricaded standoff. Tyree was believed to be alone inside, armed and dangerous. After Hayes was shot, a tense standoff began, lasting nearly 6 hours. Police set up a secure perimeter and brought in NYPD negotiators to communicate with Tyree and try to de-escalate the crisis. Negotiations began involving Tyree, police, and his loved ones, in hopes of a peaceful resolution. The fire was brought under control by about 8:30 a.m., but Tyree remained barricaded inside, his intentions unclear. Earlier that morning, Tyree posted on social media. Around 7 a.m., he wrote, "Today I die," on Facebook. He also posted about the police presence and their attempts to enter. During negotiations, Tyree made several demands, including speaking with 4 loved ones: his mother in Delaware, his girlfriend, his assistant, and a friend. He said he would surrender if his mother was brought to the scene. Authorities arranged for all 4 individuals to be brought to Staten Island between 8:30 and 11:30 a.m., hoping their presence would help end the standoff peacefully. Garland SI Tyree had been making positive changes in his life after his release from federal custody. He had even started mentoring young recruits, sharing his experience and knowledge. Tyree was actively involved in community events, aiming to give back and make a positive impact. Despite his past, Tyree was working hard to rebuild his life and reconnect with his loved ones. So why, after assembling such a large law enforcement presence, would authorities send in a single firefighter alone? The true motives of law enforcement during this intense standoff remain a point of contention and speculation. The efforts to bring Garland Tyree's mother to the scene represented a significant attempt by negotiators to achieve a peaceful outcome. She was flown in by a police helicopter from Delaware and briefed by hostage negotiation experts before any contact was made. Finally, she was able to speak to her son by phone for approximately 3 minutes. During this conversation, and after engaging with other loved ones, Tyree reportedly uttered the words, "Coming out now, I love you." This statement, made just before noon, understandably led law enforcement on the scene to believe that the protracted and dangerous standoff might be nearing a non-violent conclusion. They prepared for him to surrender as he had indicated. However, the hope for a peaceful surrender was tragically and abruptly shattered. Instead of emerging with his hands raised in submission, Garland Tyree exited the home equipped for a final, desperate confrontation. He was wearing a bulletproof vest, indicating a premeditated intention to engage, and was heavily armed with what authorities identified as an AK-47 assault rifle. Rather than surrendering, Tyree immediately opened fire on the assembled police officers who were positioned outside, expecting his capitulation. This sudden act of aggression left the officers with no alternative but to defend themselves and others at the scene from the imminent threat he posed. In response to Tyree's gunfire, the police officers on site returned fire. The exchange was brief, but decisive. Garland Tyree was struck by the officers' bullets and was killed almost instantly at the scene, bringing the nearly 6-hour standoff to a violent and fatal conclusion just after 12 o'clock noon. The area, which had been fraught with tension and the sounds of negotiation, then gunfire, fell into an uneasy silence as authorities secured the location and began the difficult task of processing the events that had just transpired. The outcome was one that negotiators had worked for hours to avoid, but Tyree's final actions ultimately dictated the tragic end. In the aftermath of the standoff, attention turned to the injured firefighter and the investigation into Tyree's home. FDNY Lieutenant James Hayes was transported to the hospital, where he was listed in stable condition and was, thankfully, expected to make a full recovery from the gunshot wounds he sustained. A subsequent search of Tyree's property by police uncovered a significant arsenal, including 2 additional magazines containing over 100 rounds of ammunition and 3 handguns, underscoring the potential for even greater violence. Police Commissioner Bill Bratton and Chief of Detectives Robert Boyce addressed the media, providing details of the incident. The event also sparked public discussion, with some criticism directed at then-Mayor Bill de Blasio regarding the timing of his hospital visit to the wounded firefighter, and it once again highlighted the persistent challenges of gang violence within New York City.